Welcome, everyone. Today, we're jumping right into an explainer on a really fascinating source text titled Finding Joy and Courage in the Ministry. Now, whether you're personally involved in ministry work yourself, or you're just kind of curious about how people handle that friction between super high expectations and real everyday anxiety, this is for you. We're going to break down the emotional psychology behind this specific type of outreach. We'll look at exactly how the author tackles that very human struggle of feeling, well, inadequate, and how they attempt to reframe those anxieties. It's honestly a brilliant study of motivation and emotional resilience, so let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this by looking at the very first sentence of our source material, because it sets up a very distinct baseline right out of the gate. The text opens with a quote from Psalms, "Serve Jehovah with rejoicing." Right away, boom, we see the core tension. The ideal state, the absolute expectation is joy. It's rejoicing. But as we all know from literally any major endeavor in life, telling someone to just rejoice and them actually feeling that joy down in the trenches, yeah, those are two very different things. The author is intentionally setting up this incredibly high emotional baseline to contrast it with the gritty reality of the human struggle that we're about to explore. So the source establishes a super clear starting point for why this work is even happening in the first place. It points out that the primary motivation for this ministry is entirely rooted in love. We're talking about a dual motivation here: love for a heavenly Father and a genuine, deep-seated desire to help neighbors come to know him. It's the ideological anchor, right? It's a noble, totally altruistic starting point. But, and this is a big but, as we're about to see, even having the most altruistic motives in the world doesn't magically shield you from psychological friction. Let's move forward and see how this actually builds into a much more complex emotional landscape. Now, here's where the text makes a really important shift. It doesn't sugarcoat things. It immediately acknowledges the friction between that perfect ideal of joy and the tough reality a lot of folks actually face in practice. The source explicitly states that others struggle to find pleasure in the preaching work. By putting that out there so openly, the author creates this safe space to address vulnerabilities directly. It validates that, hey, for some people, this just isn't a natural, easy, or automatically joyful process, and that is absolutely okay. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact nature of that friction. The text breaks the struggle down into very specific, incredibly relatable human fears. I mean, think about it. It notes the challenges of being very shy and lacking confidence, feeling intensely uncomfortable going to people's homes completely uninvited, the deep-seated, paralyzing fear of being rejected, or simply being taught your whole life to just avoid conflict. These aren't framed as spiritual failings at all. Actually, they are acknowledged as profoundly common human psychological barriers. The text validates these anxieties, recognizing that, let's be real, approaching strangers with a message is inherently daunting. The text then turns around and poses a highly direct question. Do you sometimes struggle to find joy in the ministry because of such feelings? It essentially breaks the fourth wall here. It's asking you, the reader, to engage directly with the psychological weight of those challenges. It's a rhetorical device, sure, but it forces this moment of quiet self-reflection. Have your own internal anxieties ever clouded your ability to find joy in something you genuinely truly believe in? But right after that heavy moment of reflection, the text does a complete pivot. It reaches out with this noticeable warmth, stating simply, if so, do not be discouraged. You can almost feel the shift in tone right there, right? Moving from acknowledging deep anxiety to offering a comforting hand. The author absolutely isn't trying to guilt anyone for a lack of joy. Instead, they are setting the stage to offer a completely new way of looking at these perceived shortcomings. Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is the psychological reframe the source material performs. This is like classic cognitive reframing. On one side, we have these perceived negatives, a lack of confidence and a fear of conflict. But the text literally flips these on their head. It suggests that a lack of confidence might actually indicate a humble desire to avoid drawing attention to yourself. And a fear of conflict? Well, that's reframed as a noble desire to stay out of controversy. It's a fantastic method of preserving self-esteem, basically turning perceived emotional weaknesses into highly valued positive traits like humility and peacemaking. Then, the text zeroes in on a completely universal fear, and that's rejection. It notes, and no one wants to be rejected, especially when he is trying to do good for others. This completely normalizes the pain of rejection by linking it right back to that altruism we discussed earlier. I mean, it is fundamentally jarring to the human psyche to offer something out of genuine care and just be met with a closed door or a harsh word. The author validates that sting, They're essentially saying, hey, it hurts precisely because your intentions are meant to be helpful. So, the crucial point is where the text anchors its ultimate reassurance. After unpacking the psychology of all this anxiety, reframing those perceived weaknesses, and validating the very real pain of rejection, the source offers this foundational comfort, divine awareness. It states, your heavenly Father is well aware of the challenges you face. For the reader, this represents the ultimate validation within the context of their belief system. These emotional hurdles, they aren't hidden. They are seen and deeply understood by the divine, which completely removes the crushing burden of feeling like you're alone in the struggle. And this brings us right to the conclusion of the text's core argument. This awareness isn't just passive, it's active. The text promises that the Heavenly Father wants to give you the help you need, referencing Isaiah 41:13. This right here is the text's ultimate solution to the agitated problems that we've been exploring. It bridges that massive gap between the initial expectation of rejoicing and the stark reality of human anxiety by inserting the promise of divine assistance. The ultimate takeaway message is that you don't have to overcome these profound psychological barriers entirely on your own. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The text we examined today used a very specific faith-based framework, but honestly, the underlying psychology here is universally fascinating. So I want to leave you with this question. How can reframing our personal anxieties change our approach to difficult, daunting tasks in our own lives? What if the things you perceive as your greatest weaknesses, the things holding you back from joy, could actually be viewed through a different lens as quiet strengths? It's a super powerful tool for emotional resilience. Definitely something to deeply consider the next time you face a challenge that feels, well, just a bit too big. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and as always, keep asking those big questions.